I'm Tammy at the Creston Museum, and today we are going to talk about going back to school. And it just so happens we have a school. This is the Kingsgate Schoolhouse. It was built at Kingsgate, the border crossing just east of us, in 1913 and used up until sometime between 1927 and 1934. As you can see, it's a pretty small building. Did you want to walk through it, Mattea?
Okay.
You can see how small this school is. It was built at a time when you needed 10 students to open a country school. And if you count the desks in here, you can see we could just fit 10 students in here. We know of 3 teachers who taught here between 1913 and 1927, and there are big gaps between their terms. So it's likely that the school didn't operate for all of those years, that there were a few years where there was no school at all in Kingsgate because there's simply not enough students. Now, if you take a look at the ceiling, you'll see some evidence of how this building has been modified over the years. You can see over here, there's some sections of the ceiling that are much newer than the ones on the other part, and that's because the roof leaked, needed to be replaced, and fortunately we were able to get some of the lumber grooved for us to match the original at Hushcroft Mills. If you take a look at the floor as well, it's much newer than the rest of the building. This poor little school sat right on the ground and the floor had completely rotted. So we had to do some modifications to make it at all usable for an exhibit. So Mattea, what's your favorite thing about going back to school?
I think my favorite thing about going back to school was mainly just the feeling of going back to school.
Okay.
It was very exciting to go see all my friends again after the summer, be able to catch up and talk about anything exciting that we all did together or separately.
Yeah. While you were away for summer holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you still get that feeling about September?
Yes, it's a little different as now I go far away from home to go to university, but it is still exciting just to get everything set up and kind of be able to start not a different life, but different kind of feeling of life
Cool.
right from here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part was always the school supplies. I just loved shopping for school supplies, and I have no idea why. Because the stores would always be crowded, and people were always grouchy, and my mom was always complaining about how expensive it was, but I still loved it, you know. The packages of pens and pencils and the paper that you got to put in the binders and wonder what would be written on them, all of these things that we'd be learning. I was a total geek in school, total keener. So yeah, I definitely liked the idea of what I might be learning, all these new discoveries and putting your name on everything and getting it all ready to go. And I was always disappointed when I was finished that, because then we still had 2 weeks to go before school started and I couldn't use them. But even now I still love office supplies. So. And what's your favorite thing about going back to school? Did you ever change schools partway through your school career? Start in an elementary school and then go to a high school, or maybe move to a different community altogether? That's a bit scary, isn't it? Well, I have a story here by a fellow named Cyril Colonel. That's him right there. He came to the Creston Valley in 1943. He was in grade 9 when he got here and starting high school. And his high school was up at what's now Adam Robertson. So much, much bigger school than he was used to in his hometown in Edinburgh, Alberta. And this is what he says about it. I can't say I really enjoyed high school. No more riding my horse to school. I took the bus into the high school in Creston. It was a large school with lots of kids, hardly any of them known to me. Going to a homeroom in the morning, then carrying my books to different rooms for different subjects was a totally new experience and a little overwhelming. Discipline was different too. In Edinburgh, we'd get the strap. That wasn't so bad, unless the teacher strapped you up high on the wrist, because even as boys, with all the work we did, our hands got pretty well hardened. But in high school, instead of just getting the strap and getting it over with, we got detention. That meant having to eat lunch in my homeroom or the library for a few days, depending on the seriousness of the misdemeanor. That was far more painful experience than getting the strap ever was, as having the freedom of being outside was one of the most important things to me. After I joined the Army Cadets, instead of doing schoolwork in the library for detention, the teachers made me parade up and down the sidewalk in front of the school with a full pack. At least I was outside. In my last year of schooling in Alberta, my whole class had finished the grade 7 curriculum about 6 weeks early, so the teacher got permission from the school board for us to go on studying grade 8. We moved through it so quickly that at the end of the school year, we all wrote our grade 8 exams. The whole class, with one exception, passed on to grade 9. Then we moved to BC. Alberta's education system was 1 year ahead of BC's, so at 13 years old, I got put in grade 10 with students 2 or 3 years older than me and a lot bigger. I was really small for my age. They looked at me and treated me as some kind of freak. That just wasn't going to work. So I asked to be put back in grade 9. It was still a little uncomfortable, but I made out somehow. This is a map of Canada in 1899. Take a look at the provinces. What do you notice about the size and shape of most of the provinces compared to today? Do you remember learning to write in cursive? Did you ever use this, Maclean's method of writing? This was the way teachers taught penmanship for decades and decades. H.B. Maclean, who came up with this, was responding to complaints from the teachers he worked with that the writing of their students was illegible. So he came up with this system of helping students learn to write neatly and helping teachers teach them to do so. And this is my second printing book. It went up considerably farther than this. But this one does go into the start of proper cursive writing. You can see here an example of how you are supposed to sit in your desk and how you're supposed to hold the pencil. Make sure you're holding it correctly. Once you've got everything all set up properly, you sitting properly in your desk, the book placed properly on the surface, and your pen or pencil held correctly, then come the movement drills. I recommend using at least a full page of these. Can you see them all? We've got the O's, we've got the small O's, we've got the slanted lines, we've got the hills and the valleys and the loops all joined together. Good. How are you doing? Is your hand cramping yet? Mine certainly would be. But once you've got the basic movements figured out, now you can move on to forming the letters. And again, you need to be doing at least a full line of each letter to practice properly. And you'll notice Maclean didn't put them in alphabetical order. He grouped them according to style so that you can practice the same movement over and over and over again. So first of all, we've got what I could call the circle letters. O's and A's and C's and so on. And then we get the I's and W's and E's and V's, which we could call the vowel letters. They make a vowel in between the different strokes. And then we've got R's and S's, which are kind of weird. I have yet to master doing R's and S's in cursive writing. And then the mountains or hills, N's and M's and V's and whatnot. Over here we've got what we could call the tall loop letters, L's and K's and B's, and then the ones that combine a circle and a loop. And if you look closely, you'll notice there is no X and no Z in this alphabet. If you were to group them in one of these categories, which one would it be in? Are you ready for the test? The very last page in this book is this one. This is an example of what a 7-year-old child should be able to do. So let's see your best penmanship. Write as neatly as you possibly can and let us know how you did. I could tell you, if I tried writing that, it would not look as neat and tidy as the one in this book. Just open it. Here's an English textbook from 1902. Shall we take a look at a typical English lesson? Let's start with the very first one in the book. Oops. Here we go. First up is memorization. Try to learn the little verse from Walter Scott's famous poem, The Lady of the Lake, off by heart. How can you help other people remember it? Have a contest. Who can say it best? If you've got it now, try to recite it again tomorrow. Can you still remember it? Here's Matea. She's going to read a little story called Jack of Cornwall. Listen carefully, because we're going to ask you some questions about it when she's done.
In the days of good King Arthur, there lived in Cornwall a lad named Jack. He was a brave boy, and his ambition was to kill all the giants who lived on the high rocks and troubled the people who dwelt below. After he had killed 3 or 4 of these giants, he heard an enchanted castle kept by a giant and a bad fairy. They seized people, carried them to the castle, and then turned them into beasts and birds. So Jack, determined to go to the rescue, he put on his coat which made him invisible, and climbed up to the castle. Hanging on the castle gate was a trumpet, and under it was these lines: "Whoever can this trumpet blow shall cause the giant's overthrow." Jack boldly seized the trumpet and blew a shrill blast, and as he blew, the gates flew open and the castle shook. When the giant and the fairy heard the sound of the trumpet, they quaked with fear. Jack killed the giant with his sharp sword, and the fairy flew away in a high wind. The people who had been changed into birds and beasts returned to their own shapes. Jack's fame spread through all the land, and the king gave him great rewards.
Are you ready to answer the questions about it? Here they are. See how you do. I have here an actual Education Department of BC high school examination from 1925. And it says, grade 11 junior matriculation and normal entrance. So this, if you wanted to be a teacher, is the exam you would have to write before they would allow you into normal school. Normal school being the school where they taught you how to be a teacher. So we're going to take a picture of each of the pages of this exam, and just for fun, let's see how well we do on them. We hope you've enjoyed this look back at going back to school in years gone by.
Thanks for joining us.
We hope to see you again soon.